Prague at night always seemed to wear two different faces. By day, the city was alive with tourists, the smell of coffee drifting from cafes and the rattling sound of trams echoing through the streets. But when darkness fell, it was as if the city held its breath. Mist rose from the cobblestones, swallowing the sky. Gothic towers loomed like watchful eyes, and the old bridges spanning the Vltava River seemed less like passageways and more like gates to another world. To most, the night air carried romance. To Stefan, it carried a rotten truth. Because Stefan worked for the city's maintenance crew, and he knew better than anyone that beneath Prague lay a vast network of tunnels where the city itself seemed to breathe. That network stretched like a second city, just as sprawling, hidden under the streets, built and rebuilt over centuries, tangled together in ways no map could fully capture. Stefan went down there every day to check pipes, patch leaks, and keep the filth moving. It had become routine until the disappearances began. First, one of his co-workers never came back from a shift. Then another, and then another. 3 men gone in less than 2 months. The official explanation was short and dismissive. Gas poisoning, likely unconsciousness, and subsequent loss. But Stefan didn't buy it. He knew these men. They had been doing this job for years. They never entered the tunnels without checking their gas detectors. He couldn't accept that they had simply made the same careless mistake. Something else was happening down there. The strangest part was where they'd gone missing, beneath the city's oldest quarter. 19th century tunnels that had long been abandoned, erased even from municipal records. Rumor had it those passages had once been used to move criminals secretly, for grotesque medical experiments, even for torture. They had been sealed off for decades, yet stories persisted, whispers of something that had taken root there, something that lived in the dark. Stefan had never put much faith in urban legends, but now, with his friends gone, he couldn't shake the question. What if the stories were true? One evening, after his shift, he made his decision. He would go down there himself. His curiosity burned hotter than his fear. He packed his gas mask, a heavy flashlight, and the rusted iron crowbar he always carried. At a forgotten corner of the old district, he unlocked a rusted manhole cover. He sucked in one last breath of clean air and lowered himself into the stink below. The stench hit him like a fist. Mold, rot, sewage, something sourer and heavier clinging to every stone. The stairs were narrow, slick with condensation. His mind screamed at him to turn back, but his feet carried him downward. He clicked on the flashlight, its beam cutting through thick shadows to reveal crumbling stone walls, rust-streaked pipes, arches blackened with age. Droplets fell in steady rhythm, and every sound seemed to stretch, echoing unnaturally. A few steps later, the tunnel split 3 ways. The right passage looked newer, reinforced. The left was older, with faint Latin letters scratched into its walls. The center corridor, however, was different, its stones smeared with dark stains. Stefan raised the light. The color wasn't rust. It was blood. His throat tightened. His body screamed to retreat, but his mind pressed forward. He stepped into the middle passage. Water splashed under his boots. The flashlight revealed strange marks gouged into the walls, crude and uneven. After several minutes, his beam fell across something half buried in the muck. A helmet. He bent down. It was dented, gouged with deep scratches but unmistakable. It belonged to one of the missing men. Stefan's heart thudded in his chest. The smell grew stronger as he walked. No longer just sewage, but the sweet, nauseating stench of decay. Human decay. The walls bore more stains, and among the debris on the ground, he saw splintered pipes, fragments of bone. At first, he tried to convince himself they were animal bones. Then the flashlight showed him a human jaw, teeth still intact. His stomach twisted. He lifted the beam higher. Wedged into a stone arch above was an arm, half rotted, nailed in place. The scream clawing at his throat stayed trapped behind clenched teeth. This wasn't gas. His co-workers hadn't vanished by accident. Something was down here. Someone. That was when he heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, dragging footsteps echoing closer. He killed the flashlight and pressed himself against the wall, forcing his breath into silence. The sound grew nearer, deliberate, patient. His heart hammered against his ribs like a drum. Then, just beyond the corner, a shape emerged. The beam of his flashlight clicked back on. What the light revealed froze Stefan in place. A tall, hunched figure dressed in rags, hair matted into greasy clumps, skin marred by sores and scars. But it was the eyes that held him. Their emptiness, pale and void, like they hadn't seen sunlight in decades. The man let out a guttural snarl, a sound halfway between human and animal. In one hand, he clutched a long, rusted blade. Instinct jolted Stefan backward. His boot slipped in the water, nearly sending his flashlight tumbling. The figure lunged forward with surprising speed. Stefan swung his crowbar in panic. The blow cut only air. The man dodged with practiced ease. This was no mindless creature. He had done this before. He had hunted before. Stefan bolted down the tunnel. His footsteps splashed wildly, echoing ahead of him, but behind him came the relentless tread of pursuit. The man didn't shout, didn't taunt. He only breathed, loud, steady, inescapable. The rhythm quickened behind Stefan. Closer, closer. He rounded a corner and slammed into a sealed door. Panic clawed at his chest. He rammed the crowbar into the rusted hinges, straining until the metal shrieked. At last, the door gave, swinging inward. He stumbled through, and what he saw inside made his stomach lurch. The room was a charnel house. Skins stretched and nailed across the walls like grotesque trophies. Jars lined the shelves, cloudy liquid cradling organs that floated and bobbed. In the corner, skeletons had been arranged neatly, each marked with dates scrawled onto the stone. This wasn't just a killer. This was a collector. Stefan staggered backward, bile burning his throat. Then he froze. A shadow darkened the doorway. The man had followed. His knife glinted in the trembling flashlight beam. There was nowhere left to run. Stefan's gaze darted around wildly. His eyes landed on a rusted length of chain in the corner. He snatched it up and swung it with all his strength. The chain coiled around the man's arm. Stefan yanked hard, pulling him off balance. The man stumbled, snarling like a beast, but he didn't fall. He wrenched against the restraint, muscles corded with sinew hardened by years underground. The chain snapped free. The flashlight slipped from Stefan's hand and clattered to the ground, its light flickering. In those strobing bursts, he saw the man's face clearly for the first time. Flesh crisscrossed with crude stitches, as if he had sewn his own wounds shut. Threads hung from his cracked lips. His teeth, yellowed and jagged, clenched around fibers. He wasn't a myth or a monster conjured from stories. He was a man who had vanished long ago, an escaped prisoner, perhaps, or a derelict lost in the war, who had never come back. He had survived in the dark by feeding on those who strayed too close. The chain slipped from Stefan's hands. The man charged. Stefan dropped, rolling across the filthy floor. His fingers brushed against something hard, a bone, jagged and sharp. He clutched it and thrust upward. The bone struck the man's knife, deflecting the blow, then cracked hard against his knee. The man bellowed, staggering backward for the first time. Seizing the moment, Stefan dashed past him and tore through the open doorway. His lungs burned as he ran blind through the twisting tunnels. Behind him, a roar reverberated, echoing off the stone like the howl of something ancient and furious. His legs carried him through passage after passage, every corner a gamble, every splash in the water a reminder of the footsteps still chasing him. At last, by sheer chance, he saw it. A ladder rising to a manhole above. He scrambled up, shoulders screaming with exhaustion, and slammed his crowbar against the hatch. The metal screeched, then gave way. Stefan shoved it open and burst onto the street. Cold morning air filled his lungs. He collapsed onto the cobblestones, chest heaving, sucking in gulps of clean air. The street was deserted, bathed in the first gray light of dawn. Behind him, the manhole lay closed, silent as if nothing had happened. But Stefan knew better. Those eyes, empty and unblinking, were burned into his memory. The man wasn't gone. He was still down there, waiting. No one would believe him. If he told the police, they would call him delusional. If he warned the public, they would laugh. He had seen enough to understand the truth. The city was calm, but beneath it lay hunger. A man, a killer, waiting in the dark for his next victim. And Stefan knew, deep in his bones, that someday he would have to go back, because the city would not stay silent forever.